my name is Abby Hunter, and I'm a part of a project to bring light to the creative community that we have here locally. And today with me, I have Tyrie Rowell. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Tyrie, and how you became a storyteller.
So I became a storyteller in 2007 when I began working for the Culture and Heritage Museums. Honestly, I'm going to be honest with you, I had no idea what I was doing. I got called one day to come out and volunteer to play this guy named Watt, who was an enslaved person back in 1777, and I had no idea what I was doing. I went out there and I was like, okay, interesting. It was like acting, because that's what storytelling is. Sometimes it's like acting. So got out there and I started doing my thing, and then the interpretation manager was like, what do you do again? And at the time I was working at McDonald's. I was like, okay. And she was like, that's not your talent. Do you want something different? And I was like, well, what do you mean? And so she, at that moment, had offered me a job working as what they called an interpreter of African American history. And so being a storyteller then was really talking about the history, really, of my family's history of being enslaved on the Bratton Plantation, which is currently in York County, which is what I enjoy. I mean, not saying that the experience of people being enslaved was enjoyable, but having the opportunity to really talk about what that means for my family and how I can bring my family's story to life. And because I think with storytelling, everybody has a story. How you tell it really becomes the true nature of what you get from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And how would you define storytelling?
I think I would define storytelling as an individual who has a story, whether it's fictional or non-fictional. It's truly up to them. I think storytelling really should be non-fictional. It should always be truth, because at the end of the day, you can always tell a story that's not real or that someone else has already created. But when you are an actual storyteller and you're telling the story of yourself or something that is a true story, then you gotta become more invested by it. Because if not, then it's just another story that someone else has told. But your story is your story. No one else can change your story but you. And so I think you remember that when I talked to you all about that in Greece when we were doing the power of storytelling, the stories that matter. Just because without telling your own story, then what difference does it make? It becomes someone else's story, it becomes the everyday story.
And you started off by explaining how you became a storyteller. Can you tell me how your storytelling has evolved since?
Yeah, so I have now this is year 16 that I've been doing storytelling. That's right, year 16? Yes. I'm trying to make sure math is correct. I'm an artist, not a mathematician. So I've been doing it for 16 years, and I've been traveling up and down North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and of course here in South Carolina, where I'm providing educational programs to historical sites, because some sites don't have that, right? They don't have where they have, ideally, people of color, black people who are coming out to talk about the history. And I think that that's what's evolved over time, how we become more involved and how we bring the community together. Because black people really don't want to go to plantations or even those places that their family, and I mean, it is heartbreaking, right? To even sit down and have that conversation about, well, why should I come to a place that was hurtful, that's part of pain? But for me, it's that I don't want that history to be repeated. But how do I do that? Because I'm able to tell you the story, what happened, where our families were able to be stronger together, where we're able to really be resilient and what we do. And so I think that for me that has evolved. So now I actually do brick making. So before I was just doing storytelling, when I was talking about my family's history, but in my family's history, nobody who was enslaved was ever a brick maker. So over time now, that's what I do. That is my skill. So now I've added to what my family was, whether we were weavers and we were those that worked as carpenters. We also had blacksmiths, but we also had people that worked in the fields. But now I've added another layer of skill that our family, even though I'm not enslaved, I can now talk about how working, doing storytelling and talking about what's so conveniently right at my fingertips, I can use to now talk, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is how, just starting out as a storyteller, talking to you about my family's history, but now has evolved because I've learned that my family didn't have this skill. So now I'm actually able to produce the skill, and for generations down the road, this is something I can put forth in my own family with my children and going forward.
Yeah. And how would you say you balance the historical accuracy of a story while also engaging an audience and entertaining them?
So that's a tough one, right? Because everybody knows that history is not fun. You know, unless you're a history buff, you know, you're not like, I don't want to sit and listen to this. But I also add those elements. Like when I am talking about brick making, I actually have people make bricks. Like they're actually in the weeds with me. So I'm not just talking to you and giving you this, what these historical accuracy information is. Like I'm literally talking to you, but also providing you the hands-on experience of really getting in, making a brick, really understanding, okay, for those that were enslaved, spending 14 hours, 15 hours a day in the heat making bricks, what was that experience like for you? And most people don't really understand that, you know, until they actually get into the weeds and really are like, oh, wow, this is what bricks are made from. This is how you had to make bricks. And thinking about how they have to put themselves in the shoes of those that were enslaved. And I think that for me, that becomes so much more of how history and keeping the audience or even those that are watching so engaged. I do a lot of singing, which I think you probably know, you know. I always think that brings so many people, because I do even the song, I don't know if you remember, but come back here, my Lord. So people get that, right? Yeah. It brings them in. It starts to really engage them, and they become so drawn in to what you're talking about that the outside world, those things that are just moving around, the cell phones, the cars that are going by, they really start to really focus in on you, because now you're bringing, because singing was a part of what those that were enslaved were doing, right? They were singing because that's how they passed the time, but they also told stories by singing, because come by here, my Lord, somebody needs you because somebody's praying. Come by here, my Lord. They're singing, and that is a way to keep them together as a unit, but also to really rejoice on the inside, even though on the outside they're feeling pain and hurt.
Yeah. And can you recount a memorable experience where storytelling has had an impact on someone's life significantly?
Yes. I remember it's been, like I said, been about, I want to say about 13 years ago. I met this gentleman who was a white man. And he came to Braden'sville, and he and I were just having a conversation one day, just walking, talking about, you know, everybody that was really enslaved. But he walked and we were talking about the dungeon. From what I have and what I heard through my family's history, what I heard through everyone else's family's history, he talked about, he had never heard this experience before of a dungeon. And he asked me what was the dungeon used for. And I told him that was a place where they took the slaves down in and whipped them to death, or they had been put in a big boiling pot of water and watched the skin come right off of them. And for him in that moment, I saw tears in his eyes. And he broke down in that moment and he said, I don't understand. Like, were people this cruel to people because of their skin color? And I told him, I said, you know, there are many people who in the world who will do things just because. And in that moment, yes, it was part of the skin color, but it was also because if you were sick and the doctor didn't want to treat you, that was a way of curing the disease, but also killing you at the same time. It just, so for him, that just really took him in shock. And the experience of it was just seeing him weep and cry, but really set me in a moment to, there are still good people in the world who really care, who want to make a difference, but how do we do that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's, for me, it's been always one that's stuck in my head, even 13 years later, and it'll probably for another 13 or years that I'll still remember that, and that'll become the most memorable one for me because it impacted his life. And he actually, I want to say, about 5 years after that, reached out to me and asked me, was I still there? Was I still working? telling the story of my family's history. And I told him I wasn't there, but I was traveling, now telling the story. And he was really surprised to see that I could continue this, and really wanted to know more. And so I've seen him once since then. He met me at one of the places I had went to do a program at. And I always tell people too, people always wonder, well, do you get paid to do this? And I was like, no, because why do I need to get paid for something that I love? I mean, it's like the world of theater. You know, we've been actors and we don't get paid to do that. But I mean, there's some actors who do. They don't make a lot of money. But at the end of the day, if you enjoy this passion, the money will come wherever it comes. Even if it's a gratitude or an honorarium or something like that, you do that just because you enjoy it. And so I enjoy doing this. I don't need you to pay me just because you want me to come talk about my family's history. Talking to you about my family's history and you're listening, those become the memorable moments, because those are moments I share with somebody else who then walk away with a different experience, walk away with, hey, I remember him. He talked about his family's history, you know? And that changes the impact of their life going forward and how they teach their children about the history, you know?
Yeah. And to wrap it all up in a nice little bow, what would you say being creative means to you?
Being creative. I think when we talk about creativity, it's something that's not pre-planned. Looking at whether it's productions that you've been in with me, think about, let's go back to Dracula. I'm not saying that as an actor or as a director that I don't like a stage, but I like things that are different. So when we talked about having an outdoor venue or in a venue that was totally different from a stage, it gave me the creative spark to go, this is so much better, you know? So I think creativity comes from within. If you are a creative person already, then that should come natural to you to do things out of the ordinary. But that's just me. I think that creativity is based on the person, really how they are going to value the work that they put forward. So if you're not creative, then you have no spark and no energy to keep yourself going. And I think you probably recognize, my colleague always says that to me, that I have this spark about me. And that's because at the end of the day, I think that if you don't have that spark, then you wither away and you become useless. And I find that I'm not going to be useless. I'm going to make impactful changes. I'm going to do things that are different and not by the book. And so even right now here today, we're sitting outside, right? Sitting outside. It's cold as all get out. But I love that, right? Because I'm all about, people think that, you know, I wouldn't love nature. I actually love nature. You know, I love going on bike rides. I love all that kind of stuff. So when you're creative, even just to have talked to you today in the open spaces, outdoors, it's all about how you create the space you're in.
Well, thank you for your time and your spark.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
And I'm done.
Oh, this is some habit. Why would you? So nice sitting here with Gail.
Yeah. See what you're doing?
Still recording though, isn't it?
Probably.
Okay then.
I would hope so.